Hello there, I'm Blackbright, broadcasting out of the UK, and today I wanted to talk about the Windrush scheme and why it's important, even though parents or grandparents may be scared to apply for it. If it's the first time you're passing, you can click the thumbs up, the thumbs down, you can ignore me if you like, you can share, you can subscribe. You're not obliged to do anything. This is purely for information purposes, and I just hope it helps somebody out there. Okay, so we've got the Windrush application scheme. At the moment, 8,000 people have been granted new documents, so that's optimistic, to prove they were legal in the UK. And they're probably so grateful they haven't even bothered to apply for the compensation scheme for the damage experienced while they were waiting for those documents, i.e. some of them, they lost their homes, some of them, they lost their jobs. Lots of things have happened to these people. Some of them have even died. So if you're still living and you feel as though you're entitled and you came within the parameters required for the Windrush scheme, you really should have somebody help you to apply for it. And I'm going to tell you what the criteria is already. You may have heard, but you might not have heard about it in a simplified way. As of February 2020, The Guardian reported that only 3% of eligible claimants had applied for the Windrush scheme. 36 claimants have received payment, and that was also the source is The Guardian. Because they'd been wrongfully classified as illegal immigrants. And that is what the sad thing is. You know, when people automatically assume that because you're black, number one, you're an immigrant, and number two, you're an illegal immigrant. Lots of people just assume that black people, because they have at the back of their minds that England is for white people, they just assume that anybody who's not white is an immigrant. And that is based on programming and misinformation. The fact that the people of the Windrush generation came over here legally and they were invited here to help support jobs and stuff after World War II. And the fact that the Home Office were unaware of this group of people who were entitled to live in the country and didn't need documentation at the time, doesn't really count for much when people just do not recognise that because you're black doesn't mean that you're an illegal immigrant. And so I think I wanted to get that out there up front. The Windrush Compensation Scheme Expenditures Bill 2019 to 2021 is called the Money Bill in Parliament. I wonder why they called it the Money Bill. Anyway, the Windrush scheme, aka the Windrush Compensation Scheme, it's the same thing, was set up to compensate individuals who have suffered loss in connection with being unable to demonstrate their lawful status in the United Kingdom. Most of those who were affected were the Windrush generation, who were invited to the UK because of labour shortages after World War II, and who brought their families with them or sent for them once they felt settled in the UK between 1948 and 1973. Now, in order for someone to feel settled, they have to feel safe. So you're not going to bring your family over if you don't think you're safe. You're going to bring your family over if you think you have a right to be in the country and you're legally in the country. There's no way you would want to put your family in any jeopardy. So the Windrush generation, they came over here legally and settled. And when you say they settled, they didn't have documents back in that time. So you have to remember that, because it was a part of UK, Caribbean, it was all one. So they didn't need any paperwork. So they came over here. It was like England was an extension of the Caribbean. So a lot of them, when they asked, they said to their husbands or their children, once they got a little place or something, you can come over now. They still didn't need documentation. So anyway, Commonwealth citizens who have been legally resident in the United Kingdom during this period, but do not possess documents or credentials to prove their status in the UK because prior to the Immigration Act 1971, documentation was not required, are eligible to apply for the Windrush Compensation Scheme. While the scheme is also open to any eligible person who arrived in the United Kingdom before 1988 and who is lawfully in the United Kingdom and their family members, it is still contingent upon documentation to prove this status is one way or the other. The thing is that when you read the Windrush scheme, it's saying, oh, if you haven't got any documents, you can still apply. The fact of the matter is, yes, you might not need the documents, but you still need the dates of the documents. You still need to know when your mother came over, her passport details, your father came over, his passport details. And if your parents are anything like mine, the old school type of parents who don't talk their business and everything is a secret, everything is, done under the cover for whatever reason, I don't know. But when you think about, and the thing is, with white families, from what I see, they're so open. If they've been raped, they kind of talk it to their families. If they've done any time in jail, they tell their family. If the whole of their bloody history is an open book. So there is nothing to hide in white families. And maybe when you're thinking about government officials, if they are white, they might think that black families or Caribbean families operate in the same way. It wouldn't occur to them because, people judge others as they judge themselves. It wouldn't occur to them that there'd be so much secrecy over nothing. I mean, I think I've told you this story before. I went to Jamaica because I wanted to get a Jamaican passport. I wanted to have the benefit of both. And I was refused. Why? Because my mother had secrets. And number one, it was difficult enough trying to get I couldn't get my mum's passport. You can't ask her for it. She wants to know why you want it and this and that and what I got fast enough, what I got to do with the information. And all of this, everything's like paranoia. So I had to go to Jamaica with what little information I knew. Knew my father's real name. I knew he was born in Christiana or raised in Christiana. I knew he was in the police force. I knew my mother's area where she said she lived. I knew my grandmother's name. I didn't know my grandfather's name, but I assumed my grandfather's was the same as my grandmother's. And I assumed that my mother had the same surname as her mother and her father. So off I trot, pay my money to get my Jamaican passport. And I'm told, the information is incorrect. Your grandmother wasn't married to your grandfather. What is the name of your grandfather? Now, how the hell am I supposed to know that? And what school did your mother go to? And what area was that school? And I'm trying to think, bloody hell. You mentioned Manchester or Clarendon or Brownstown or Tweedside. That's all you know. And you just pick that up when they're talking to their friends. It's not like they're going to directly include you and give you the background history of how they grew up and where they grew up. So I went there and I was totally flabbergasted. I lost my money after waiting so long in a queue because I didn't have the information. And that is what I'm saying now. When you think about, especially, I don't know if it's the same for all parts of the Caribbean. I can only talk about Jamaicans. But when you think about Jamaicans who came here back then and who didn't really want people to know their business, and especially their children who should be seen and not heard, and have got no business knowing your business kind of thing, how the hell are you supposed to garner information that is relevant when you're trying to fill up a Windrush application? And the young people who want to apply on behalf of their parents or grandparents, how are they going to have access to that information? As I said, my mum's palliative, I still don't know her passport information. I wouldn't know where to find it if I needed it. Fortunately, I'm born here. I don't need to. But might have been helpful when I went to Jamaica to know exactly when she came to the UK and whether or not she'd been back and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I know she's been back once, but it's just like, I don't think parents realise, especially the old school Caribbean parents, I don't think they realise how difficult they make it when they hide the truth, or because they think it's not relevant, because they think that doesn't really have anything to do with the children. In the back of their minds, I think they think it's not relevant, and how can you benefit from having that information? And it's bizarre because, if my mother didn't give me my father's name, now suppose my mother had given me my father's name, then I could have probably gone there with my father's details, but maybe not. I think your mother is the primary person, and they would assume that you. But I'm surprised that even in Jamaica, they expected an applicant to have all that information. So maybe it's not the culture, maybe it's the old culture, but maybe it's not the culture today. But my point is that you've got people from the Windrush era, which is the same era as my mother, who will not be telling children and grandchildren about the date they came over, when they came over, how they came over, what they were doing, where they were working. And it's this kind of information they're asking for on the Windrush application scheme. The Windrush application is actually 20 pages, but 18 active pages and 44 pages of guidance notes. Now that's daunting in itself for people who may not have someone to help them complete the form. Yes, we have Windrush surgeries. I know there's 40 of them scattered around somewhere, but not everyone is going to feel confident enough to admit, number one, that they may have literacy problems or that they have any problems at all. So yes, it's fine putting out the scheme, but the people who run the scheme should understand the culture of that generation. And I don't think they do, because the culture of that generation is totally different to the online and electronic culture of today. So with those kind of people, you'd need to be sitting there and having a conversation and saying, so what did you do such and such? And he might say, why, in the 1960s, I went here and I went there, and we used to play dominoes here, and we used to work here, and and you might say, okay, when you worked here, what exactly did you do? Well, I was a little engineer, and a little firm in the bottom of Cricklewood, and nice little firm, a little private firm I used to work for. I used to work all night. We used to do night work. And you might get information that way, and it might trigger some memories. But when you've got a form, it's alien to them. And even when you have somebody sitting there and saying, okay, so what year did you come into the country? What year did you work at such and such? And, what year did you leave the country? And what date did you come back? I mean, it's just like, it's foreign. It's foreign, because even me, if somebody said to me, when did you go to Jamaica? I'm like, bloody hell, it seems like yesterday. Well, I know this time because I went last year, so that's totally different. But ask me when I went before then. I don't know if it was 6 years ago or 5 years ago. I can't remember. Time flies, and I don't need to recall that information. And when you're dealing with people of the Windrush generation, when they go for their little trips, they're not thinking that they're going to need to recall that information, and without the documents to prove it. And plus, a lot of them people, they don't want to keep a whole heap of papers. Once they've been on holiday, they think, I'm going to need this again. You've done your insurance, you've been on your holiday, you're back safe. You've got all your travel, you've got all your belongings, you have your you come back, there's nothing missing. So there's no need to hold on to any documentation. You just dash with the ticket. You know what you need it for, unless you've gone for a honeymoon and you might be sentimental. And yet these same people are meant to complete the Windrush application forms. I don't know why I babble on so much. And then what I was also thinking is that a lot of these people are approaching pensionable age. Can you imagine? These are people who came over when they're young. They've paid into the pot, the pension pot. And then because they can't prove that they were in the country, they can't even get their bloody pension. How sad is that? Not only are they being denied health care, being denied, unable to rent, can't get a bank account, can't get a driving license. All of that stuff because of the hostile environment policy. And yet the thing, just because they don't have the paperwork, and it's not as if they lost it, the boarding passes, the Home Office are the ones that mislaid or destroyed it. I don't know if it's because they were going green or what, but they lost it. So therefore, the way I see it, because it was their error why they lost all of that paperwork, maybe deliberately or by accident. We don't know, because I know when I work for an agency, a government agency, and I'm afraid to delete after a certain time. They keep saying, Myrna, you can't keep it for so long. And yes, you do have a period after which I can't think it's statutory limitations, like they archive. You archive after, I think, 3 years, 10 years, whatever. So you have that kind of system in place. But the fact of the matter is, sometimes, even though what I have may not be as important as people's boarding passes, sometimes I'm afraid to get rid of it, because I think to myself, if I delete it, am I going to need it? And maybe if the people in the Home Office were genuinely didn't know about, I don't know at what point they got rid of the boarding passes, but maybe they genuinely thought that those boarding passes were superfluous to requirements. Maybe they thought, we don't need this information anymore. But if they should have scanned it or done something with it. But the fact of the matter is that is where we are now. We're dealing with a situation where, what do you keep and what do you throw away? But because they are the culprits, they're the ones that messed up, they should have the legal aid in. They should put legal aid in place for these people. Yes, it's going to be expensive, but they didn't lose the documents. And yet you can't get legal aid for those type of immigration cases. It's really, really unfortunate. So, what else have I got here? Does the Windrush scheme offer a ray of hope to any of the Windrushians? Many Windrushians are fearful of applying in case they're not successful and fear being deported. They may feel that they are exposing themselves to scrutiny, and when they are at an age where they just want peace. For those who are not computer illiterate or vocally efficient, it's just another hurdle they have to climb. Under the Windrush scheme, you can apply for the documentation and British nationality free of charge, and the following criteria. The individual of any nationality who is settled in the United Kingdom before 31st of December 1988 and is settled in the United Kingdom, I don't know if that means now or as of before 1988. But what does settled mean to some people? Being settled means being an ordinarily resident in the UK without any immigration restrictions on the length of your stay in the UK. Ordinarily resident means living in the UK lawfully, voluntarily and properly settled. However, The term ordinarily resident is not defined in Immigration or Nationality Acts and has not been defined in the Act of Parliament, which means it is ambiguous and open to interpretation, which is unfortunate. A person can be ordinarily resident in more than one country, but can only be domiciled in one country. And that's the main distinction of that, I think. Apparently, a foreign national can claim to be ordinarily resident at a time and have every intention of being an ordinarily resident while they were in the country. But if their actions do not confirm that intention, the application could get thrown out. So I guess if they find out that you were here and then you spent a lot of time in your originating country, it could get thrown out because they would consider that you weren't ordinarily resident in this country. Ordinarily resident usually means you had a GP, you have a dentist, you have a bank account, you have a national health insurance number, you have a tax code, all that kind of stuff. You pay rent, you have mortgage, council tax, or whatever it was called back then. And so maybe a driving license. Many of the Windrushians came into the UK for employment, which should technically have given them automatic ordinary resident status. In the Home Office National Policy assessing ordinary residents dated 25th October 2017, it states that where it is not possible to establish the date on which a person became ordinarily resident, it may be reasonable to treat them as having ordinarily resident from the date of their arrival. The thing is that is saying that they should automatically be considered as ordinarily resident. But if you've got people rounding them up and deporting them and putting them in detention centres, that goes against that policy. And the thing is, since they haven't got their boarding passes, how are they supposed to prove when they arrived? And then you've got a system where everybody's so suspicious. They all think everybody's here illegally. It's really weird, because as long as you've got an accent, they think you're illegal. That's the way, well, not generalisation, of course, but a lot of people think that if you've got an accent, you're here illegally. And the more stronger that accent, the more likely they are to think you're here illegally. It's just a presumption they make, because they assume that if you've been here from you were young or before 1973, you wouldn't have an accent. So if you have got one, they're kind of thinking, well, hey, that person, and he can't prove, he doesn't have any documentation. The thing is with accents is that if you're in a country, any country, between the ages of 4 and 8, that is the language, that is the accent you keep, regardless of how long you go into another country. So these people that you find going to America and they go there for 2 weeks and they come back, oh, how you doing? I've been living in America. All of those people that you find, especially back in the 80s, used to find these people, they only went to America for a holiday, and they're coming back with an American accent. It doesn't work like that. I'm born in this country. I spent 11 years in the United States, and I never came back with an accent. I came back with some of their terms, but I didn't come back with an accent. And so people, if some of these people from the Caribbean didn't come over to the UK until they were maybe 10, they're still going to have a strong Jamaican accent unless they work at changing that accent. And so a lot of them, they came over after they were 10 with their parents. And so they would still have a strong accent, but it doesn't mean that they're illegal, and it doesn't mean that they're not, it doesn't mean that they're immigrants as such. Well, they're foreign nationals, but they're legal foreign nationals. What else? A problem arises in the following statement. If a man's presence in a particular place or country is unlawful, for example, in breach of the immigration laws, he cannot rely on his unlawful residence as constituting ordinary residence. This is affirmed by the nationality purposes. This is affirmed for nationality purposes by Section 50 in brackets 5 of the British Nationality Act 1981. So what that is saying is that, okay, if you're in the country and you came here illegally, you can't claim ordinary residence. So if people came the Windrush and they haven't got their paperwork, they're going to be automatically described as illegal or unlawfully in the country. So one knocks out the other, doesn't it? Because that's the whole problem. That is where this problem has arisen. They are unable to prove that they're lawfully in the country, and yet it's saying if you came before a certain date, you should automatically be ordinarily resident. So I don't know. It just kind of contradicts itself. There's probably some kind of technicality that I'm missing because I'm not an immigration lawyer. And I'm not qualified in any. I'm not an authority on immigration. So I'm just trying to make 2 and 2 and coming out with 5. Maybe I don't know. That's why it's always important to have an immigration advisor, and not a little bogus one. Make sure you get one either from, the law society. They have credible, and they're all registered. Don't go on these websites and looking for immigration lawyers, because a lot of them, not all of them, but some of them can rip you off. We've heard sort of some horror stories where they take people's money and they know that there's no chance in hell, and then they come up with some kind of excuse why the person hasn't got their documentation. So make sure you get a credible immigration advisor and use either the Law Society website where they've got a list of registered lawyers, or you can use, like I said, the Law Society. Okay, and even Citizens Advice Bureau on their website, they have some immigration lawyers. Anyway, so we have a situation where, because boarding passes disappeared, Windrushians cannot prove that they entered the country lawfully, so they cannot claim to be ordinarily resident. A person ordinarily resident in the UK implies an element of safety, but they can still be liable to removal or deportation, which is why, along with the fact that they cannot prove that they came into the country legally, many Windrushians are reluctant to apply for the scheme. And that is why they're such a low percentage. They don't feel safe enough to apply. They can be more than eligible, but if they haven't got all these dates and all this information, of course they're going to feel vulnerable. Of course they're not going to want to apply. They go and apply, next thing you know, they're being deported. And they have every right to be in the country. You may be entitled to apply for Windrush Compensation Scheme if you are a Commonwealth national who settled in the United Kingdom before January 1973 or have a right of abode. Children of Commonwealth citizens who settled before 1973, were born in the UK or arrived before they were 18 are also eligible to apply for the scheme. If you live outside the UK, you have to use the online form, and I'll put a link in the description. If I forget, I'll put it back later. You can email the Windrush helpline if you have any issues, and they should call you back if you give them your contact details, and I'll give you that number and email address. Yeah, it's really hard because you know what, I do these videos and then by the time I get to the end, I forget to put in the links half the time. A couple of days later, I'm like, oh, didn't put the link in. The Windrush helpline should not be confused with Windrush surgeries, of which there are around 40 of them around the country, and they're run by community members and charities who help individual inquiries. The Windrush helpline will give you advice on the scheme and how to apply. They cannot help everyone to complete the forms, but they will assist helpless individuals and those who require extra care. I'm not quite sure what kind of people those are. If you live inside the UK and want, because to me, I think most people of that generation are helpless and need extra care. Personally, the originals, I'm not talking about the children and the grandchildren, but the original applicants, especially if they're widowed or especially if they're on their own, especially if they haven't got, kids around them to help them or relatives. If you live inside the UK and want to complete the Windrush application SCORM, it is available in PDF. I'm going to try and give you that link as well. 20 pages can be quite daunting, so yeah. If you prefer a hard copy posted to you, please contact the Windrush helpline on 0800 678 1925, which is a free number, Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m, Saturday and Sunday between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. It's quite good that they work on Sundays. Or by email is the Commonwealth Task Force, all one word, at homeoffice.gov.uk. The form requests personal details which you may find invasive if you're a private person, but I would imagine that the information is required to track down your history in the country. Some of the questions are ridiculous. Date mother or father came into the country. Like I said, I don't know how the hell you would know that. Sometimes I think the West Indian culture works to our disadvantage. The form also asks if you have any information about passports of your grandparents. I mean, for young people, I don't know. Maybe they talk to their grandparents. I mean, maybe the younger people get more out of their grandparents. I mean, I know personally, I'm very open with my grandchildren. So, but there again, am I a Windrushian? No, I'm not. I'm of the Windrush generation. My mother came at a time, yeah, my mother's fine, but I was trying to think, if my mother hadn't come at the time she had, would I still be as open as I am? I still think I would, because I'm born here, so. Okay, let me see now. If you have any criminal convictions, I'm not sure how that will affect your application, but that is a requirement on the form. You have to cite all your criminal convictions. The rest of the form seems pretty straightforward. The issue I have is that it states that Windrush scheme is for those who do not have any documents, but it requires you to know the dates of documents in order to be successful. If you were to ask me today where my passport needed renewing, I wouldn't know. I would need to go and look for my passport and get the date. So what I'm saying is that I don't know how these people, without having the document to refer to know what dates they came, left, what date the passport was issued and all that stuff. The only thing they're going to know is that it was issued in London, and they might say, boy, I think it was about 1962, you know. And they might even be a few years out. Okay, despite the best of intentions, the Windrush scheme is riddled with bureaucracy, and it also sits under the Home Office, the same institution responsible for deportation and the hostile environment policy, making it unattractive to many eligible Windrushians who might otherwise have applied for it. Campaigners have been pressing to have the Windrush scheme moved out of the Home Office and given to an independent body because of past indiscretions and errors. Patrick Vernon, OBE, believes that each Windrushian should get an automatic amount, I think is about 10 grand, especially during the coronavirus pandemic, because they're extra vulnerable. And to me, I think that would be a fair result. It would be quick. I mean, they know who they are, fighting over how much they should get, because some people are saying, oh, 10,000 isn't enough for this and that. But for those who don't have anything at all, it's a lot of money. So if you're interested or you know somebody who's eligible, the scheme is open. It's been extended to 2023. So that's all I've got to say for now. Another long video. You're probably exhausted. You probably said, thank God for that. She's finished. That's all. Bye-bye.